Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's MPART PFAS Town Hall, Detroit Metropolitan, Wayne County Airport. My name is Matt Tomlinson, and I'm with Eagle's Environmental Support Division. And before I turn it over to tonight's moderator, we're going to go through a couple of housekeeping slides to help you with your navigating experience. So first, I want to remind everybody that all lines are muted during the webinar. We are recording this webinar, so you'll be provided with a link at a later date and be able to go back and watch this. And so there's a couple of ways that you can interact with us this evening. The first would be to submit a question using your question or Q&A dialog box located on the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. There's also a raised hand icon. And if you're calling in on the telephone, you can click on #2, and that will indicate that your hand is raised, will identify you by your last 4 digits, and can unmute your mic that way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to this evening's moderator, and that's Abigail Hendershot.
All right, thank you, Matt. Let's go to the next slide here. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight and welcome. We're going to talk about the Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport. And this is our PFAS Town Hall. So as Matt said, my name is Abigail Hendershot. I am the Executive Director for the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. And I will go through a quick agenda with you. We're going to do some quick intros on an MPART overview. What is MPART? What are we talking about with PFAS? Lisa Fisher is one of our head toxicologists. She's going to, with the Department of Health and Human Services, she's going to go through some of the health effects, health questions that you might be having about PFAS. Kevin Wojciechowski is our project manager with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. He's going to talk about the investigation on site at Detroit Metro. Ryan McWhinney is a water quality specialist. He's also going to be talking about surface water and stormwater sampling that's been done in and around the Detroit Metro Airport. And then we'll come back and I'll guide you through the MPART website to show you where the information is for tonight's presentation. And then we'll go through, we'll have lots of time for questions and answers at the end. So feel free as we go through to put your questions in the question and answer box, and we'll answer them all at the very end. So you can do that at any time if you've got anything that comes up. We'll also be adding in links in the chat box, so check those out. There will be appropriate links as we go through. Okay, so what is MPART? MPART is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Started as an executive order in 2019 under Governor Whitmer. It's an enduring body that was started to have to collaborate as a very unique multi-agency approach across 7 different departments. It really helps us to strategize and direct that implementation of all the different actions the state's going to take for PFAS. And it's really led to some pretty crucial and very incremental types of actions that we've been able to take as a collaborative effort. And so this has really put MPART and Michigan out as a leader for PFAS because of this collaborative approach from the MPART team. So let's get into what PFAS are. It's a collection of compounds called per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. PFAS is when we say PFAS, it really refers to the whole family of compounds. We've got 5,000 different compounds on the slide. I've heard upward of 10,000 different compounds. I think the jury's still out on how many different compounds there are, but there's a lot of different compounds in the family. All of them have very strong carbon-fluorine bonds, which makes them so unique and yet so useful in our modern society. They usually act as surfactants, very, very stable to high temperatures. They repel waters, oils, fats, greases. And we started actually producing them in the late 1940s and then got into it for industry. And then by the 1960s we're producing them for commercial uses. But why are we concerned about PFAS? Well, they get into the ecosystem and they become very widespread. They travel very far because of their affiliation with water. They don't break down easily, so they're very hard to get rid of. They don't biodegrade in the environment, but they do bioaccumulate, which means they can build up in our bodies, they can build up in fish, they can build up in our food chain. And we know that PFAS, some of the PFAS has enough toxicological information to know that there are health effects with PFAS, but we're still working on the science and trying to understand a larger mass of information and repercussions with this particular family of compounds. And we're also still lacking any federal standards when it comes to PFAS. There are no enforceable regulatory guidance standards at the federal level currently. So let's look at some of the PFAS uses. So we know that PFAS are used in carpet, anything that's stained proofed, scotch guarded, your carpets, your carpet cleaning products, a lot of your food packaging. So your, grease resistant packaging or wrappers are going to have a little shiny coating on them. That's usually going to be a PFAS coating so that the grease doesn't get through and drip all over your clothes. Your couch has probably been stain guarded before it comes home. We're finding PFAS in cosmetics. Of course, we see it in outdoor gear, all the waterproofing that goes into the outdoor gear and the clothing. Adhesives and sealants, you wouldn't think that, but there are definitely some in there. Protective coatings, our Teflon pans, we've used those for years. And a lot of the new pans say that they're PFOA free, which is, they taken PFOA out, but there's still many other families of PFAS compounds there. Car seats. And then the last one is firefighting foam, which of course is a very big issue for PFAS, but not all foams have PFAS. So there are a couple different types of firefighting foams. Wood structures would require a Class A foam, which is not PFAS, and firefighting foam, like what they would use at an airport, is a Class B foam, which is used specifically for hydrocarbon fires, very hot jet fuel fires, those kinds of things. So those are the issues that we're going to talk about today are for firefighting foam. So part of the complexity, though, that comes with PFAS is its ability to really move through our ecosystem. You have PFAS producing industries or industries that use PFAS. They can discharge it to the wastewater treatment plant. They can have releases to either the ground or the air. But our wastewater treatment plants aren't designed to capture or filter out the PFAS. And so it can end up at our in the sludges to our landfills or in the biosolids and in our streams and rivers. And so we've done a lot of work at the state to try to break that cycle in various places to try to keep it from continuing to cycle through our ecosystem, all because at the end we want the drinking water for our state to be healthy and clean for our residents. And so a lot of what you see here is a lot of the work that MPART's been focusing on are these specific different industry types, the sampling that goes with it. So I'm going to talk some more about that as we go through here. So one of the big things that Michigan's done that really has set us apart from some of the other states in the country are the Michigan PFAS standards. We have groundwater cleanup criteria and drinking water criteria. So both of those are the same levels for these Michigan standards. So they're both the level for drinking water for the municipal drinking water systems and the groundwater cleanup criteria. So if your groundwater is impacted, these are the standards to which people would need to clean it up to so that it's acceptable for drinking water uses in the future. And so these are all enforceable standards under Michigan law, which obviously is something that is necessary in order to make and hold people accountable for contamination. So the other thing that MPART has been working on is really trying to evaluate and investigate the conditions of our lakes and streams. We've been doing a lot of surface water testing. We've been doing foam testing. We've been doing fish testing. You'll see the picture on the right-hand side is a boat that is doing some fish collection so that we can actually test the PFAS levels in fish, which has been a really big endeavor and continues to this day. But this has all led us to what is now 189 different sites around the state that we know have been impacted, where groundwater actually exceeds those cleanup criteria. And so 189 sites we have identified. Now this looks maybe a little alarming for Michigan, but it's really going to be no different in any other state once they start looking too. Most of the other states haven't gotten this far in evaluating for PFAS or understanding what the conditions are. All 189 sites are on our website, including the Detroit Metro. And so you can go out and look at each of these dots and see which kinds of sites. Most of them are going to be military installations, landfills, industrial sites, airports, plating facilities, and so on. Those are the kinds of sites that usually end up having groundwater contamination. One of the other things I will just say is that MPART also has a citizens advisory work group. We have a collection of residents from across the state who have been impacted by PFAS. And their charge is to work with MPART to really help us to engage and empower those communities, have a voice at the table with MPART, and how to educate the general public. How do we communicate the information, the science, the data, and get it out to that community? So I'm going to leave it there, but I will be back at the very end to walk through the MPART website. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Fisher, who's going to talk to you about PFAS and health. Lisa.
All right, thanks, Abby. So I'm Lisa Fisher. I'm a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about PFAS and potential health outcomes and what DHHS's role is. So with these PFAS investigations, we work with the local health department to understand the unique health concerns facing the community. And while EGLE leads the site investigation, DHHS works with the local health department to lead any public health planning and response actions that may be necessary. So like Abby said, there's a lot of ways that we can be exposed to PFAS. One of the main ways is by drinking contaminated water. Another pathway would be eating fish that are in water bodies contaminated with PFAS. On the MPART webpage, you can go and see all of our Eat Safe Fish guidelines related to PFAS. You can also be exposed by accidentally swallowing contaminated soil or dust, or by eating foods that have been packaged in materials that contain PFAS, and then use of consumer products as well. So all of these routes typically involve, ingestion of PFAS chemicals. So somehow swallowing or eating things that have PFAS in them. PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern. So this is a graph that shows blood levels of some different PFAS in Americans from the years 2000 to 2014. And what's interesting is that some companies started phasing out their use of PFOS and PFOA in 2002. And you can see that reflected in these blood levels, especially for PFOS. There's a pretty dramatic decrease from the years 2000 to 2004. So while some companies, have phased out the use of PFOS and PFOA, they're using different PFAS, which typically have a shorter half-life, meaning that they spend less time in the human body. But we just don't have a lot of information about these other PFAS compounds as it relates to health effects. So we have the most knowledge about health effects or health outcomes with two particular PFAS compounds, and those are PFOA and PFOS. So these are some of the health outcomes in humans that are associated with high exposure to PFOA and PFOS. So they include reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, small decreases in infant birth weight, and higher cholesterol, specifically total and LDL cholesterol. And then we've got some more thyroid disease, liver damage, decreased immune response to vaccines, and for high exposure to PFOA, developing kidney and testicular cancers. And it's important to note that, just because you have had exposure to PFOA and PFOS or other PFAS doesn't necessarily mean that you will develop these health outcomes. It just means that you would be more likely to develop them than someone who has not had a high level of exposure. And then I just wanted to touch on our Eat Safe Fish information. So we have fish advisories throughout the state of Michigan. They're found at michigan.gov/eatsafefish. And, fish are tested for PFAS as well as other contaminants, including mercury, PCBs, dioxin, and a handful of others. So there's a lot of good information in there. And if anyone has questions, they can always reach out to me as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Wojciechowski, and I'm the PFAS site lead for the Detroit Metro Airport. I'm in the Remediation Redevelopment Division of Eagle, and I work out of the Warren District Office. And I'm going to talk about the site investigation as it pertains to soil and groundwater. So as you're seeing now is the overview of Metro Airport, with the dotted line being the property boundary of the airport. And in 2020, the airport received a $250,000 grant to do a PFAS investigation. So the airport has hired a consultant and has started that investigation. And we received the first phase of the results on September 7th of this year. Now, these areas, as you see on the map here, these orange areas are known past use of AFFF foam. It was either an accidental release, responding to an incident, or training. And I'll go through these real quick. The car rental area was the old from the Northwest Airlines accident from the early 80s. Hangar 1516 was an accidental release of AFFF foam. Old G Concourse was a response to a crash and incident. 3L Pond was runoff from known training area, which is right next to the FFTA is the former firefighting training area. And then the sixth area is the new ARF. It's the new training facility where they train for the airport. Next slide, please. So here we're going to break down and we're only going to focus on 3 areas here because they did over 50, collected 50 samples, did over 20 some borings out here. But when they did the borings, only 3 of them is where they found groundwater. The other borings did not find groundwater. And so soil was sampled at those other locations, and soil samples, 42 of the 50 did have PFOA or PFOS detected, but here these slides were only talking about the shallow groundwater. So this first one again is the new training facility that's over in the east central portion of the property. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see where the zoomed in area we're looking at with the red box. So they collected 4 soil borings and 2 pond samples. And in the 1 soil boring, they did find groundwater and did sample it and had the PFOS hit of 19 parts per trillion. Next slide. This next one is, can't see it. This is the south central portion of the airport property. This is the old former fire training area. And again, we have 5 borings. Only the center boring is where they found PFAS compounds. They actually found a very elevated PFAS compounds, 5 of them that are above criteria. But the good news is surrounding borings, they did not find the groundwater. So it looks like we got a very localized perch zone of groundwater, which also may be why it's so high, is because there's no runoff or very little dilution going on, because the water is not flowing like typical groundwater flows. Next slide, please. The last area where they found groundwater, we were able to sample that, was a 516 hangar, where the foam was accidentally released in the hangar. And then, so they sampled the nearest spot where it would run off and hit the soil off the pavement asphalt. And again, groundwater was detection at 4 compounds above our criteria in this location. But again, only one of the 3 borings they found and were able to collect groundwater. Next slide, please. So the previous what I was talking about was the airport's consultants' work on the property itself. As far as the drinking water, Eagle and local health and DHHS got together and looked for drinking water wells around the airport, either residential or business. There was a couple old ones identified. All those wells turned out to be, one was a closed golf course, a couple were vacant land, and one was a building no longer being used. So just a few wells were identified, and all of them turned out they were no longer in use. So the area is served by the Great Lakes Water Authority. The water comes from the Detroit River, and it was sampled in October of 2020 and July of 2021, and no PFAS were detected. And they will continue to monitor the drinking water system annually going forward. All right, I think I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to talk about the surface water.
Hello, thank you, Kevin. So my name is Ryan McWhinney. I'm an environmental quality analyst with the Water Resources Division. I work in the emerging pollutant section, and I will be discussing surface and stormwater at the airport and around it. So in spring of 2019, Eagle included PFAS analysis as part of a compliance sampling inspection where elevated levels of PFOS were detected. In August of 2019, Eagle requested a PFAS source identification plan from the airport that was approved in February the following year. Since then, additional sampling has been conducted as part of the plan and in response to AFFF spills, as Kevin mentioned. He also mentioned on September 7th of this year, the airport has submitted the phase 1 PFAS investigation results, which we are currently under review here at Eagle. Next slide. So now we're going to go over some stormwater outfall data at the airport. These are PFOS sample results and dates from Detroit County Airport points of discharge. These are in parts per trillion. The top arrow is outfall 3 east, and the bottom one is for outfall 6. There was also some internal storm sewer system results kind of spread out throughout the airport, with results ranging from 28 to 310 parts per trillion. Eagle regulates based on discharges to waters of the state, which we have in these 2 outfalls for 3 and 6 that are shown on this map. Next slide. August of last year, Eagle's surface water assessment section collected 41 surface water samples from the Ecorse River and the Frankenpoet Drain. You can see we've got the airport circled in the red square. We do have some elevated samples of 344 and 151. These are samples in drains located near the county airport. Fish were attempted to be collected. We are looking to go back and collect some more bass from the Frankenpoet Drain so that we have a sufficient sample size for any potential fish advisories moving forward. Next slide. Next steps, the airport's consultant will continue to investigate on-site PFAS groundwater and surface water contamination on the property. They will be proposing and submitting a phase 2 work plan for Eagle to review and improve, which will include groundwater, stormwater, and soil sampling. So I think I will be passing that back off to you, Abby.
right. Thanks, Ryan. Excellent. Okay, just a few more things before we get into the questions and answers. I'm going to take you to the MPART website, and so let me make sure that you can see this. All right. Matt, can you see the MPART website for me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. This is the web page for the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Right now, we're highlighting our Great Lakes Virtual PFAS Summit. It's going to start this December. Registration's open for that. But for just so that you know, we've got all of our public meetings, including the likes of this one, and other public meetings are on our calendar for MPART. You do not have to do prior registration, so you can just grab the link and jump on any of these meetings. So it makes it very easy. The other thing I will show you is our PFAS sites. So this particular site, both the interactive map work, you can do it that way, or you can go down here and just type in the name of your site, and it will take you, give you the basics information as a drop down, and give you maps that you saw here and some of the accumulative of the data. So in this particular case, there's no drinking water wells, so that's not on this list, but there we do have groundwater monitoring wells and surface water samples collected, and then the number over criteria. So this page will get updated as more information comes in, but information's here on when it was last updated and who the site lead is, so you can call and get questions. As there is a lot of other information here on the PFAS site, including if you wanted to join the Citizens Advisory Work Group, if you wanted to talk about PFAS and fish, any kinds of information for private well owners is here, laboratories offering home testing. If you have, if you're in the area and you do have your own well, we would encourage you to get it tested. And so, all right, I think I will leave, like I said, there's a plethora of information here on the MPART website. So feel free to check that out. All right, let us go to questions and answers. So let's take us back to Matt reviewing how we can actually ask a question.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of different ways. There's the Q&A dialog box on your on your Zoom toolbar located on the bottom of your screen. There's also a raise hand function that's on the bottom of your screen. And I'm not seeing anybody calling in on the telephone. So we don't need to address that at this point. We currently do not have any questions in the hopper, but we are able to answer whatever you want to submit.
Yes, so raise your hand or go ahead and ask a question. We have a whole host of additional panelists on the call ready to take whatever questions you might have. So feel free to ask away. All right, excellent. Keep asking your questions. Matt, it does look like we've got 2 questions now.
Yes, so this first one is, will the results of the DTW study plan be available online?
Great question. Kevin or Ryan, do you guys have an answer for that?
Are they asking for the detailed about the next steps? Is that what they're asking about? If we're going to have that on, or
I'm wondering if it's the phase 1 report.
that's something would be on. It'd be something that'd be foilable, but we would not have those details, all those details on the MPART website itself. Just kind of the highlights on the website, but that can be obtained for you.
The maps are from that plan, though.
That's from the result. Yeah, well, not from this. It's from the results from the first phase plan. So we had the first phase plan we approved, and then they gave us the results.
Okay.
And we're waiting for this phase 2 plan.
For the person who asked that, maybe if that didn't answer your question, you can feel free to type again and we'll finish up that question. So Mindy, did you want to add on?
Hi. Yeah. I'm Mindy Staffler. I'm with the Water Resources Division for Eagle. And just want to let the public know that much of our information in Water Resources Division is available on My Waters. That's our publicly available database. And so you can view a variety of documents pertaining to Metro Airport by going through My Waters and searching for the site.
Great reminder. Thanks, Mindy.
Okay, next question. What is the status of current plans to reduce PFAS discharges to sanitary sewers from the airport?
Mindy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump back in here. So the site is still undergoing the characterization and investigation phase of responding to PFAS and the initial findings. So as we're learning more information and as the airport's learning more information about where the sources are and what the impacts are to both the sanitary sewer as well as the storm sewer and surface water discharges, that's sort of the next step yet to come.
Thanks, Mindy. All right. Any other questions?
So I'm not seeing any questions in the queue and not seeing any raised hands. Oh, we did just get one pop in. Has the airport been required to install PFAS treatment for sanitary sewer discharges by DUWA? Does the airport anticipate being required to install treatment?
And we do have Scott Bell, the consultant for the airport, on the line, and maybe he would know specifically whether or not the airport has been required to be installed any PFAS treatment as of yet.
Yeah, to my knowledge, they have not. I think monitoring is still underway, and I'm not aware of any specific treatment to sanitary discharges that's being planned at this time. Not to say it won't happen, but I'm not aware of it.
And this is Jacob O'Neill. I'm the director of Wayne County Airport Authority. And I can confirm what Scott is saying is we have no requirements at this time, but as was stated before, we're in an investigation stage, and based on the information we have coming in, we're going to create plans to minimize and reduce and eliminate impact to all discharge areas, stormwater, sanitary, etc.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob. All right. Any other questions we've got?
Yeah, we've got one that just came in. Can you recap and or provide more specifics on what monitoring looks like at DTW?
All right, let me, I'll go back in the slides and we will look at, let's go back to the big overview slide here. Maybe we can have Kevin talk first about additional monitoring for the soils and groundwater, and then maybe Ryan can jump on and talk about additional sampling, what monitoring would look like for surface water as well. Kevin?
Yeah, so as far as the investigation to the soil and groundwater, they're using either direct push technology, which also referred to as geoprobe, where they're grabbing 5-foot or 4-foot sections of soil, looking at them, logging them, and then if they run into groundwater, setting temporary wells, collecting those groundwater samples. They've also been using hand augers in areas where they've had too many utilities and stuff like that. And then now, based on these results, Under 201, they need to go out and delineate the groundwater plumes in these areas where they did have groundwater. And, there's not a lot of it, so they can also demonstrate that the groundwater is kind of in a perched aquifer and not moving by surrounding the borings. They did find groundwater, and showing that it's only got, there's no groundwater surrounding it, and it's just a little perch zone. So there's a couple different ways they can go about it. Typically when it's in the groundwater, it's moving. They have to chase it and follow it until even follow it off-site if they have to. So, with this case being not as much groundwater, but they will still have to go out and do another round of soil and groundwater samples to find the scope and delineate these areas further.
And it's fair to say, Kevin, that you and Ryan are looking at your data holistically to make sure that the surface water data and the groundwater and soil data all match up and are looked at as a big picture and not just individually.
Yeah, and we don't have the soil data. We don't really have good we don't have criteria to compare it to right now, but the soil data will help. Gathering that data will help for future if there is remediation and cleanup. That data will be useful in driving those if there is cleanups and where they need to maybe remove some soil because it is a source that's continuing to feed into maybe a surface water body or something. So all that data will be good, for figuring this out.
Excellent. Ryan, do you want to add some additional information on any surface water sampling or monitoring that you're anticipating?
Yeah, so fully characterizing the surface water at the airport property, we're expanding areas to fully encompass any water that leaves the airport property as far as surface water goes, exploring concentrations at, if there's any other drains that leave the property outside of the outfalls we've talked about previously. Just really trying to get a grasp on all of the discharges from airport property that do enter waters of the state, fully characterize all that, see if there are any exceedances or if there aren't, and go from there.
Excellent. And I think it's important for everybody on the phone to know that when you do these kinds of investigations, it's an iterative approach. So it's very much phase by phase, putting together that bigger picture, and using the surface water data helps inform the groundwater data, helps inform the soils, and looking at it as a holistic picture develops what we call a conceptual site model. And so it's that conceptual site model needs to be well defined before you can actually take have a good understanding for source areas and for eventual needs for remediation. So that's where we're headed, but this is really just the first phase of data, both for soils, groundwater, and surface water. And so we're continuing to work with Detroit Metro to get additional data to really understand what's leaving the site and what those next steps will need to be. Okay. Matt, did we get any other questions?
Not seeing any additional questions currently in the hopper, and nobody has their hands up.
Okay, it's an easy crowd then. We'll give you another minute or two to think about it if anybody's got a final question, and then maybe we'll give you an early night.
Okay, we just had another one populate, and it is, what is the process for notifying community if there is PFAS findings at DTW or other areas?
So this is our main goals. It's again a multi-layered process for notifying communities. We've been working with local officials for these communities for all of our PFAS sites. First step is notifying local officials, working with local public health, with the owners or operators of the facilities themselves, and working with townships, municipal leaders, legislators, just so they're all informed. We're also going out and informing local residents if it looks like their homes may be affected, if it looks like their properties may be affected. They're getting, in a lot of cases, we'll want to sample drinking water wells. So we'll be out notifying them and having direct communications with them. And then the big way that we do them are these types of town halls where we're actually able to present information, present data, and then record it so people can come back and watch it and view it as a full presentation. So they get all of the information. And that is our process for notifying communities. We've been able to work really well with local communities and local officials with this, and have that been pretty successful, both in taking preventative measures to make sure that homes that might potentially be affected are sampled even before we get some of these data results, but also that the local officials and our local communities are kept informed as we're going through these investigations.
Okay, we've got another question in here. On behalf of the Office of Rep Talib, thank you for hosting this briefing. Please let us know how we can be helpful in providing updates to Romulus residents if needed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody being here today.
Another question in here, has DUWA required any other source reduction strategies for DTW to reduce PFAS discharges to the sanitary sewer? DTW discharges 1.2 million gallons per day to the sewer.
That's a great question. I know that when it came to our what we call our industrial pretreatment program, all of our wastewater treatment plants around the state were asked to review all potential sources to their communities and to take action to have them sampled and identify them. So I'm going to ask either Scott Bell or Jacob directly if they remember if they've had any specific requests from the Detroit Water Works to do those kinds of assessments. Scott, do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head. I do know that airport does discharge. I believe the airport discharges to the Downriver Utility Wastewater Authority, but I'm not aware of the any specific requirements that they've imposed on the airport.
And I'll have to refer to, I'll look back into our files, but off the top of my head, I do not recall any.
Excellent. Anyone else have information? I, don't know off the top of my head either. So that's something we would have to look into specifically. I don't recall it having, we'll have to get additional data because at this point, I think we'll all be guessing. So it's better to just get back with that user. So if the user or the, because this one says an anonymous attendee, if you want us to get back with you, go ahead and just type your name and email in the question and answer, and we'll get back with you. So, all right. Any final questions or thoughts?
No new questions.
All right. And we will get back to that attendee who asked that last question. So thanks for that. And I just want to really appreciate everyone being here and taking the time to come join us for this presentation. It will be recorded, or it was recorded. It will be put out, closed captioned, and put out on our website and our YouTube channel that you guys will be able to review it and get back with us. Let us know if you have any additional questions. Feel free to reach out to anyone on the team here. So have a good night. Thank you.